Hi, everybody. My name is Naomi Weinstein, and I work at ICL, one of the MCTAC-CTAC partners. And we are here on webinar number 5 of our Workforce Priorities series. I am joined today by Glenn Karunis, who is an independent consultant and seasoned HR professional who has been taking us through a whole bunch of these workforce and human resource issues, as well as Edie Schwartz, who is a seasoned human resources professional. A seasoned human services professional and former executive director who has been lending her special expertise in terms of recovery-oriented organizations to our discussions on human resource issues. So for this conversation, Glenn is doing the majority of the heavy lifting, so I'm going to just send it over to him.
Okay, thanks, Naomi. Appreciate it. And hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us here today. We're going to, start, as we usually do, with a key question. Today's discussion is going to be talking about managing employee performance. So get ready to do some work. This is not easy stuff, but it's really important stuff, and obviously could be very rewarding stuff if you do it correctly. So the key question that we're going to start with today is, does the organization have a culture that ensures that the right people with the right skills do the right things to get the right results? And then today we're going to focus on, and will work well with you, because that's the whole essence of managing performance, is to get people to do what they're supposed to be doing, to provide an opportunity for discussion and feedback, and to make sure that people are being held accountable and getting results. So here we go. Next slide. So you might be shocked to see that we're starting with a slide called "What is Performance Management?" And just let me point out some of the key things here. It's managers and employees working together to plan, monitor, and review the employee's work, and to provide feedback as necessary. So the key concepts here are, it's a process. It involves the employee and the manager working together. It's planning, monitoring, reviewing. It's basically a dialogue, an ongoing dialogue, if you're doing it right, about work performance. And then it's incumbent upon the manager to provide feedback to help the employee be the best they possibly can be. So, then I move to the second bullet, which is very simply helping people do the work you need them to do and get them to do it in the best way they can, and frankly, to develop them, to get them to achieve more, to be a better employee and a better person. Okay, so that's kind of the overview. Next slide. Performance management is looked at from a bunch of different perspectives. From the manager's perspective, which we're going to primarily focus on here today, it's to set and communicate goals. So it's, making sure that you're pretty clear about what needs to get done. It's about developing job-related skills. And this is really the key to the performance management process, is you're working with the employee to help them, to get input from them, and to help them get better. You're monitoring and assessing employee performance because everybody wants feedback. Everybody wants to know, how are we doing? So it's that opportunity for dialogue. It's that opportunity for feedback. It's that opportunity for collaboration, providing encouragement and corrective feedback as needed. So looking at this, and you're going to hear me say a few times today, flip the script, because I think there's a traditional way to look at this, and I think there's probably a better way to look at this, and I'll point that out as we go along. So, it's really important that you're encouraging, that you're supportive, and providing corrective feedback. So, you can't be afraid to say, look, there's some things that I think you can be doing better, and let's explore how we're going to do that. And, clearly it's an opportunity for two-way feedback, for dialogue, for discussion, or interaction, because that's the way that people are going to really learn, and that's the way you're going to have a good relationship with your employees. Next slide. But then there's the employee's perspective. Okay, so you have the manager's perspective, which is, I got to make sure that the employee is doing what I need them to do. I'm going to help them try to do it. I'm going to support them. And, if I need to, I'm going to provide some correction. From the employee's perspective, they need to know again. So here's where it aligns. They need to know, what am I supposed to actually be doing? Please clarify the expectations for me. How well am I required to do it? What's the standard? What do you think of how I've been doing it? How will I be rewarded? Now, in some cases, that's not within your purview. So certainly when you get into compensation and benefits, that's something that's an organizational issue. But, rewards can be psychic rewards. It can be, recognition for a job well done. And then clearly everybody hopefully wants to improve. So how can I improve my performance? So you see there's a lot of alignment with what the manager and the employee wants to get out of this process, but they're slightly different perspectives. Next slide. And really, the foundation of a strong performance management system is a trusting relationship between the supervisor and a staff person. That's really ultimately what you have to do. It's all the things that you're doing throughout the time that you're supervising someone to develop that trust, to build rapport, to make sure that people are constantly learning, to make sure that the clients are being served appropriately. Next slide. And, that strong foundation really provides the safe environment for feedback. If you've created a great environment, I know we had our session on organizational culture where, you're looking to really create a terrific environment that everybody wants to work in, then you as a manager have to create the environment that's safe, that's trusting, that is an opportunity to have people say, look, I'm struggling in this area. I need some help. Or, you know what, you're doing a terrific job. Let's figure out how you can get even better and maybe give you opportunities for furtherance down the road where you can really thrive, hopefully in this organization, but certainly it'll be great for your career. It allows the supervisors to understand the staff person's underlying priorities and motivations. You got to get to know people. You got to get to understand what moves them and what they're passionate about. It helps the staff person recognize their role. Listen, everybody wants to know where their place in the world is, and certainly in the organization. And ultimately, it supports a culture of accountability. Basically, what you're trying to do is ensure that there's alignment and responsibility. The ultimate responsibility is really the managers and the organizations, but you have to create this kind of mutuality to make sure that we're all responsible for getting the work done and we're all responsible for getting the results that are expected. Next slide. So creating a culture of accountability, all right, is all about setting clear expectations. What are we looking to do? Making sure that your employees have the clear capability. What skills do I need? If I don't have them, how am I going to get them? Clear management, monitoring, checkpoints, regular feedback. Feedback, all right, that to me is the key to this whole thing. It's that opportunity for managers to provide whatever you want to call it, supervision, guidance, coaching, feedback, constant dialogue, problem solving. That is the key to creating accountability, and that's the key to a performance management system. And then one of the key things about accountability, and when I do a lot of leadership training, I really focus on this, and that is setting up clear consequences. What are the rewards or consequences for getting my work done or not getting my work done? That's really, to me, the cornerstone of accountability. So it's really feedback and consequences for performance or non-performance. So what you're really trying to do is to set, monitor, and make sure people are meeting expectations. And if they're not, providing feedback. And if there's a continuing issue or problem, then you have to focus on, what are the consequences for getting this done or not getting this done. Next slide. Okay, for those visual learners out there, we wanted to make sure that we had a complete schematic for you so you could see everything in one place. So, you can see the first part of performance management is the plan. Okay, so it's setting expectations, figuring out what the goals are. How are we going to measure this? What are the expectations? What are you responsible for? Then you have the coaching piece, the supervision, the leadership. It's assessing performance, having really effective conversations, dialogue, feedback to that dialogue. And, another really, difficult thing for a lot of people, especially if they're high achievers, is to spend time listening. You really have to listen to what your staff is saying and process it and make sure that you are responsible for processing that information and giving them the feedback, the guidance, and the coaching that they need. Then, look, it's all about performance management is all about staff development. It's about developing people, inspiring them, recognizing them, motivating, delegating work to them so it's off your plate and they have an opportunity to stretch and grow. So, the elements of performance management, and frankly, you're managing for results are right here. You're planning, you're coaching, you're developing, you're recognizing, you're motivating, you're holding people accountable, you're getting the work done. Okay? Next slide. Okay, so feedback, really important piece. I talked about it in terms of consequences. I talked about it in terms of the schematic. It is one of the cornerstones of what we're going to be discussing today. Feedback, coaching, supervision, whatever you'd like to call it, it's an opportunity for managers to come across to make sure that they're monitoring and providing guidance for the employee to make sure that everybody's on the same page and that they're performing to their optimum ability. So, it's hard to do when you know people so well, their strengths, their challenges, their foibles, their quirks. But really, when it comes to good feedback, you really have to focus on the actual behaviors and not the personality, not whether you like them or you don't like them, not whether you think they're, terrific at something, but you really have to focus on the actual behaviors. What are they doing and how can you make sure that, they're doing something in the way that the organization expects and to do it better if it needs to be corrected. Or frankly, you have people, let's look at the other side. This is why I talked about flipping the script. The other side is people are doing things fabulously. You want to make sure that they continue. So it's looking at the things they're doing, looking at the actual behaviors and assessing them and then making sure that they're done really, really well. All, frankly, in furtherance of the organization's goals and in many cases of your client's development. So you're going to prepare, you're going to make sure that the expectations are clear and that there's dialogue so they're understood. You know what they say about assuming, never assume. You can fill in the blanks. But you have to make sure that people understand what the expectations are. What are the barriers? What might be in the way? I either have a mental block or I have some kind of block that's not allowing me to do my best. So as a manager, I have to explore that and figure out, I used to talk a lot about, the manager is sort of the umbrella and tries to keep the rain off the employees so they can stay dry and cozy and do their best. So, part of a key manager's role is figuring out what the barriers are and eliminating them. So, you have to look at that perspective too. And of course, listen to the employee, understand their perspective, recognize that your way may not be their way, and it may not be the only way. I think one of the things that managers sometimes have an issue with is if the employee does something, the result is good. It's certainly within the parameters that they're permitted to do, but it's not the manager's way. And the manager is trying to kind of get the employee to do it their way. You have to understand there's lots of different ways to get things done. And if they're within the parameters that are permitted and somebody feels more comfortable or the results, frankly, are as good, if not better than the way you do it, then you have to allow for that, that latitude to get things done. Really important, managers, leaders are role models. So make sure that your behavior is consistent with the message you're trying to get across. You're always going to look at that feedback and then where are we going from here? What are our next steps? How are we going to both make sure that we're moving in the right direction and that we're both looking to improve? If there's something that I'm doing as the manager that I can do better, please tell me because I'm here to help you. And, being an optimist is really important. I've done a lot of work lately, especially with organizations and their leaders that are kind of struggling with the pandemic, I talk a lot about resilience. And one of the keys to resilience is looking at things optimistically. So you're going to talk optimistically about the future. You're going to look at feedback. Your goal is to try to be constructive about the future rather than destructive about, what may have happened in the past. Next slide. Because really, feedback in human nature, what do we like and what do we not like? So we dislike being corrected. Nobody likes to be told, you're doing things wrong. This is not the way you should be doing it. Here's the way you should be doing it. But we tend to like learning new skills. We don't like looking bad in front of others, but we do like getting help. We don't like necessarily being told something. And notice we have told here in quotation marks because it kind of connotes that you've done something wrong and I'm trying to tell you to do something right. But, when we're not told something, instead we're having meaningful dialogue, that's positive. When we're criticized, nobody likes it. Critique, criticism, just the word is not necessarily something that people feel good about. But we like having our good work acknowledged. We like getting feedback. So it's really all about the approach. So remember I talked about flipping the script? There's so much time that we tend to spend when we think of performance management. I know most of you are probably saying, oh my gosh, yeah, that's filling out the form. Yeah, that's something that we do once a year. Yeah, that's something that, when there's a problem, I have to address it. You really have to begin to look at this differently. It's really about the approach. It's about flipping the script. It's about saying, this is how I'm going to have regular opportunities to interact with my employees so I'm on the same page that they are and I can help them to be better. Next slide. So I talked about criticism, right? Criticism, here's what you did, is the whole focus is, here's what you did wrong. I'm criticizing you. It's really about what you did in the past. It tends to be personal. Whatever you might think, and I'm just trying to make you better. But people, when you're critical of them, they're gonna take it negatively. They're gonna take it personally. Frankly, when I've discovered that people start to take things personally, they get defensive. They're not going to listen, and it really creates an unsafe feeling for people where they're more than likely to shut you out as opposed to be open to what you're trying to tell them. But look, constructive feedback is more future oriented. It's behaviorally focused. It's much more positive. It's here's how we can work together so the next time, we can make sure that we're all doing things better. It's really solution oriented as opposed to problem oriented. And what you're trying to do again is to create, as we said from the very beginning, it's to establish that trust. It's to create a safe feeling. It's to try to establish the environment where we're all in this together and we all want the same outcome. We all want to get positive results. We all want to make the environment a good one and a pleasant one. We all want to pursue our passions. Let's look at this in a positive way. I'm only trying to help. Next slide. So developing staff, getting out that watering can and watering the flowers so they're growing. I don't know if you're anything like me where, right now your lawn isn't looking too great after the hot summer. So it's getting out, it's seeding, it's watering. I'm doing it twice a day. I'm out there with my little watering can, putting the sprinklers on in the morning because I want my grass to grow. Well, I'm developing my grass, but it's much more rewarding to develop your staff. So, you really have to, be available to them. Connecting regularly. It's about identifying and highlighting skills. It's about, providing them with opportunities, problem solve, dialogue with them. One of the greatest things you can do to develop people is give them autonomy. Listen, people will make mistakes, but mistakes tend to be the greatest teachers. That's how you're going to get people to learn and grow. So look, kind of sometimes they're tethered to you. I know some of my best employees were the ones that would come to me at touch points, but I'd let them go. I'd let them do their own work. Was it always exactly the way I wanted it done? Probably not. And in some cases, they probably did it more efficiently than I would have done it. But they come back to me at certain points when they needed a decision, and that's when I would help them do it. Those employees were much easier to work with than the ones that would constantly come to me, okay, what do I do next? What do I do now? And those people you have to help. Be the other type where I need you to be more autonomous. Come to me when you need help. Don't come to me for everything. Okay. But, certainly you want to make it positive. You want to kind of push them a little bit to get them to try, to succeed, to make mistakes, but all with the goal of doing better. Explore people's interests, network. What are they passionate about? How can you connect them to other people who maybe you don't have the particular expertise, but you can connect them to people who do. So really help them grow. Encourage them to constantly learn and grow, provide feedback, and listen, you got to celebrate those wins. When good stuff happens, you got to get excited. You got to be really great. The other night I was watching I'm a big Islander fan. I was watching the playoff game. They went into double overtime. The Islanders finally won. And you talk about the celebration. The team was jumping up and down all over each other. They were facing elimination. Everybody was so excited. The goalie actually slid. You might have seen the GIF online. The goalie actually slid across the ice. Everybody was excited. Now, they're playing again tonight. Don't you think they're going to be energized because of all the celebration? Now, I'm not suggesting that you're jumping up and down in your office or somebody is sliding across the floor to celebrate some great stuff, but I think you get the idea. You've got to celebrate those wins. You've got to make sure you're connecting to good things because that's what's going to help people get excited, stoke their passion, and do even better in the future. Next slide. Listen, you got to get out there and catch people doing something right. So go out and play catch. Go out and be, with your employees. Don't, hang out in the office and wait for them to come to you. Sometimes you go out and observe them. All right. And when you see them doing something well, you have to make sure that you catch them doing something right away. We tend to be, I'll get to that word again, we tend to be critical. If you see somebody doing something wrong, you're going to stop them and make sure they do it right. Well, this is again, flipping that script. It's seeing what people are doing, catch them doing something right, and recognize them, because what we know is behavior that gets recognized gets repeated. So I'm going to give you the thumbs up. I'm going to say, and I've done it, frankly, in many cases where I've seen my staff member working on something, especially where they've had, say a great customer service moment, and I've seen them say, and I've gone to them and say, you know what, that was terrific. I saw the way you interacted with that family member. You did such a great job. I can see a lot of the anxiety just, melted away when you spoke to them and when you addressed their concerns. Keep up the good work. That was fabulous. So remember, catch people doing something right. It'll go a long way towards making sure that you get more of those moments time and time again. Next slide. So, listen, developing staff is all about growth opportunities. I'm not going to read this slide, but, you have, job tasks, internal stuff that you can do for them, outside training and education, whether it's through schooling or workshops, being involved in publications and presenting at conferences. And then, one of the key things is just establishing relationship with the manager, relationship with other mentors throughout the organization. Because sometimes it's a little bit easier to talk to somebody who is not directly supervising you. So it's about, doing that, networking, connecting with people, having your manager connect you with somebody or having them connect on their own. This is all about growing, learning, being able to explore opportunities to help yourself learn and grow. Next slide. So, listen, we'd all love it to be wonderful all the time. And that's the goal that we have, is to manage that performance so people are doing well. But you know what? You're going to have stuff that comes up. We call it addressing isolated concerns because, again, in the spirit of flipping the script, we don't want people to constantly be focusing on, oh, what are they doing wrong? How am I going to be able to stop that? How am I going to, I'm going to write people up, disciplinary action. And listen, we'll address that because it is necessary. But, we like to think of more of these things as isolated concerns. It's opportunities for feedback that may not be part of regular meetings, but, they're touch points. So the supervisor needs to be around to answer staff's questions, to help the staff with problem solving. And frankly, instead of solving the problem for them, it's kind of walking them through and helping them come to their own decision and conclusion. And that's how you're going to develop them for the future. Providing coaching and feedback, like we said, could it be that you're not quite doing something the way we need it to do and there's additional training? Go online, there's videos, let me show you how to do something, let me send you to a conference. It's really important that you identify that for people. And then, look, we're not going to ignore it. There is potential disciplinary action. I like to call it corrective action because I think it has a little bit more of a positive connotation than disciplinary action, or everybody's favorite, writing people up. Okay, so, corrective action when it's needed, but I guess I would submit to you that it should be, I don't want to say the last resort, but it should be a resort that's pretty far down the road after you've really tried to address concerns in another way. Next slide. So here we go. Look, for all of you that certainly need to hear this, and look, we all get focused on this. I was in human resources as a chief HR officer, as a director for over 30 years. Frankly, the thing that probably people called me about more than anything else was, here's a problem. How do we discipline somebody? I guess I would try towards the latter part of my career to say, look, we got to catch people doing something right. And instead of looking what they're doing wrong and looking to discipline them for it, we've got to catch doing something right and to celebrate that. Wouldn't that be much better than constantly looking to play gotcha or constantly worrying about how are we going to write people up? But look, it's necessary. It's a part of every organization, and it should be progressive. So, you start with your performance management process, which is what we've been talking about. Then, you go up to your progressive steps. Different organizations do it differently. Some have final warnings, some have verbal warnings, some don't have suspensions, but ultimately the last step is discharge or termination. We all know what this process is about. If you haven't experienced it, you will at some point in your career. So you need to know about it, but again, it shouldn't be the primary focus. It should really be the thing that, if you've tried everything else and it hasn't worked, you have to kind of resort to this. Next slide. So, corrective action, writing people up, disciplinary action. There's a couple of real how-tos, and I really tried to focus on this when I was doing a lot of HR and employee relations and labor relations. And that is, to get your point across, you've got to focus on the behavior, not the employee. It's not, this is what, you are as a person. It's, this is what you did. Here's what we expect you to do. Here are the things that you need to do better. Here's how you're going to correct it. I don't want to ever have to sit here again. I don't want to have to sit here with this conversation and have to put, pen to paper, or back in the day, or certainly have to type something out and hand it to you. I don't want to do that. I want you to do things better. So, you need to do that. But a key thing about corrective action is the consequences. If you're not improving, if you're not correcting, frankly, I like to use the word correcting, because improving, let's use an example. If I'm late 20 times and now I'm only late 10 times, I've improved. Well, to me, that's not, the focus of this. You should really cut it down to only those instances that are absolutely critical or an emergent. So I understand the concept of improvement. You have to shape behavior to make it better, but really you're looking to correct it. And those consequences for not correcting it, you have to really spell out. And this is one of the key things for holding people accountable for their actions. Next slide. So, I've talked about the process. I've talked about feedback. I've talked about the system. It's about, developing your relationship with the staff. It's about, doing that coaching and providing the feedback. It's about helping staff learn and grow. And it's about holding staff accountable, basically, to address issues that are, some concerns that come up. Now, I know what you're saying, Glenn. I've got all these different kinds of staff. All right. I was hoping you were going to get to this part in your presentation, because, we've all known there are different kinds of staff. And when we were preparing this, we spent a lot of time talking about different kinds of staff. So I'll go over them. I have my own view as to what percentage of people are in these different categories, but let's talk about your high performers. For your high performers, you want to recognize their great work. You want to provide them opportunities to really learn and grow and to get to that next level. And you want them to stay. So you're going to basically say to them, what does it take to make sure that you stay here? You're my go-to. You're my person that I rely on. How can I make this an even better experience for you? Then you have your mid performers. It's supporting their positive performance. It's making sure that you're striving for greater consistency. You want to push them, nudge them, if you will, towards being a high performer and provide opportunities for them to grow as well. Now, we all know the underperformers. Again, in the spirit of flipping the script, I know certainly from my time in HR, maybe your experience is similar. We tend to spend more time with our underperformers than our mids and our highs because, there are problem children, if you will. I don't mean to be pejorative in that sense, but I'm just using a term that, people I've heard used before. They're the people that are causing us issues. There are people that are causing us agita. All right. So look, you can't completely abandon them. You have to identify what the root concerns are. Where is the root of this problem? Is it skill? Is it attitude? Is it approach? Is it knowledge? Then you have to come up with a collaborative plan for improvement. And the key here is collaborative because you've got to get them in on this. Because folks, if they're not willing to work, then, I'm not sure what they're doing there. And we'll get into, the up or out conversation in a little bit. You have to decide, do I move to corrective action if this is a continual issue? Move them up or move them out. That is the key for underperformers. Next slide. So let's talk about everybody's favorite, the high performers, the folks we should be spending a good amount of time on. You can't just say, look, they're great, let me leave them alone. You have to spend time with them to make sure that they're appreciated. Okay, so you're gonna make them part of your plan. You're gonna recognize their contributions in whatever way you can. You have to make sure that you're articulating their unique value, what they bring to the table that makes your team great. Explore with them what's it going to take to stay. Does it mean a promotion? Is it something that's expanding? Do you want some greater scope? What's it going to be? What do I need to do to keep you? Is it stretch assignments? Because listen, I've identified that I think you can really be a great X. Not everybody wants to move into management, but if they do, what are some projects? What are some exposure? What are some opportunities to help you grow to be part of, maybe an organization succession plan? But, again, I put this at the, on the top and I put it at the bottom. Express your appreciation for their good work regularly. You've got to let them know that they are key to your success and they've got to keep going in this direction. And they will keep going. Often these are the most passionate people because you want to make sure that you appreciate them and they continue to be high performers. Next slide. Now the mid performers, that almost by definition is your largest group. I mean, my view is, you've got the bulk of people in the middle. I think you have more high performers than you do underperformers. I think your underperformers are the smallest percentage, but unfortunately people tell me that we spend the most time with them. So again, in the spirit of flipping the script, we've got to start spending more time with our mid and our high performers. So your goal for your mid performer is, you don't want them leaving. You want them to be better. You want them to be stronger. So, some of them need more guidance and feedback than others, but you have to discern that and you have to have them to make sure that they know what they do well and what they don't do as well, you're going to help them with. Express, your appreciation for them. You're looking to develop their confidence and consistency because sometimes that's what separates a mid from a high is just that consistency. They do it well, but just not all the time. Clarify for them what it takes to be a high performer and what are the barriers? Well, is this a solvable issue? Hopefully it is. You're looking to explore that. You're looking to dialogue. You're looking to problem solve and ultimately to support their growth. You want to make sure that when you're dealing with a mid performer, You want to tell them that you're valuable, and you want to make sure that you're giving them confidence that they can indeed move up. All right, next slide. But sometimes there are just chronic stuff that happens and they need to be addressed. And sometimes there are your high performers and your mid performers that have some of this chronic stuff that happens. Usually not, but you're going to have these incidents that occur with any level of employee. But look, you can't just put your head in the sand. It does impact the team. It takes up a lot of your time, and it jeopardizes client outcomes and compliance with what you're trying to do. So you need to address them. Next slide. So underperformers, okay? Don't ignore the problem. It's not going to go away by itself. This is where management and supervision really is challenging, but really is important. You have to give serious thought to why they're an underperformer. Is it perhaps a poor job fit? It's not their quote unquote fault. They're just in the wrong spot. Do they not have the skills that you need? Maybe they never learned it at the previous place that they were working at, and it's incumbent upon you to kind of root that out and see if you can help them. Is it because things are unclear? They think they're supposed to be doing X, but they're really supposed to be doing Y? Or is it just the employee has a different approach than you do, and somehow you're not aligned? Next slide. So to manage the underperformers, here are 5 steps. All right. Explain to them what you've observed, how it's impacted the team. And the key thing here is that you want to help. Engage the person. That is so critical. Engage the person in dialogue, because you need to know, are they open to making changes? Are they ready to be coached? So, you're really looking at brainstorming, at dialoguing, at exploring, at probing. You really have to get in there and work at this to try to make sure that these people, are doing better. So then you're going to jointly develop the plans, because, if it's you developing the plan without their input, they're not going to be as passionate about it. Maybe they don't care. Now, you hope that's not the case, but, you need to develop a plan. You need to jointly develop it, figure out what resources are needed. Do I have to go to a seminar? Do I have to go to a conference? Do I have to spend some time shadowing somebody who is a high performer? Monitor the plan and then follow up. But, you have to establish those consequences. Again, you're looking to hold people accountable. So those consequences are really important. Next slide. Ultimately, whether it's a mid-performer that's kind of gone wrong or an underperformer, you have to ask yourself, and you have to ask others, is this the right fit? So here are some questions that we put together that when you're talking with your staff person, you need to explore. Are you bored? I know when I talk to my son, he's 18, the worst thing that can happen, the worst, is that I'm bored. That's like, the most horrible thing that can happen. So look, ask, are you bored? Do you feel like you're not valued? Do you think that this is a skill issue and you can really do better? Do you feel that, I or somebody else are not giving you enough support? Do you, for some reason, are you not confident about, doing your job? This is why it's so important to establish that safe environment. Are you feeling frustrated? And do you feel frustrated regularly? Are there aspects of this job that really just aren't right for you? They don't fit your personality, or they don't play to your strengths. Is there something that I or we can help so you can really be a full-fledged, well-rounded, really contributing member of this team? And you think you're in the right spot? Okay. So, these are really important questions to probe out, whether you ask them literally like this, or whether you ask them in another way. These are the things that you want to tease out from people to make sure that indeed, is this an underperformer because it's not the right fit, or do you need to do something that it is the right fit, or it's a fit and maybe it's not right because you need to do something different. So, these are really important questions to ask of any performer, but particularly of the underperformers. Next slide. All right. So, in the spirit of moving up or moving out, letting people linger in jobs in which they can't be successful doesn't do anyone any favors, you or the employee. If people aren't performing, move them up, move them out, or find a place for them where they can be successful. All right? Pretty simple message. Not easy to do, but pretty simple message. Next slide. So now you've dealt with people. You've certainly dealt with underperformers. All right. What are the options for the next step? Well, continue. If you feel that you've had that dialogue, there's a true desire to do better. Let's continue to work on this issue. But I caution you, do it within a specific time frame. So you're going to you're going to set up a meeting for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month, to see where you are. You might even meet weekly, especially when you're trying to work on this. So you're going to continue to work on it, but you got to put a time frame on it. This can't last forever. Switch roles of departments to achieve a better match. And I don't mean, and I hear this all the time. I had a big session yesterday where a lot of the managers were complaining about, underperforming employees being dumped. They use the words in other departments. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about, because really it's your responsibility if an employee really isn't getting it and can't get it to really, figure out a way to move them out. But maybe it's just not a good fit there in that department. So you need to switch roles of departments to achieve a better match. Maybe resigning short of being terminated is a good thing for everybody. So there's a mutual agreement to resign. If they don't want to resign, though, listen, this has gotten to the point where it's difficult. I may have to move to the disciplinary process right away. I was trying to avoid that, but look, it just seems that I'm exploring this with you. It's not working for either of us. Let's figure out a way out of this where it's going to be better for both of us. Next slide. Ultimately, your performance management system, has to be beyond just the typical end of year check the box activity. This is not what you want to do. So in essence, in your best performance management systems, you're going to do all the things we talked about. You're going to assess what's really important, connect them to the goals. You're going to recognize strengths and provide positive feedback. That's the thing that you're going to look to mostly focus on. You're going to identify gaps and, where you can be constructive and move forward. I know it's very difficult when people get defensive. You've got to work through that defensiveness, and that's where you engage in the dialogue. Maybe you say you appear to be offended by what I've said, or defensive. Tell me what I can do to help. Link it to their personal goals and passions. All right. Refer to the progress that they've made. I've seen you take steps. I know you can do this. And a true performance management system is not the once a year performance appraisal, check the box because your agency or some outside agency says you got to do it. That's really that is kind of traditional performance management that people talk about and look about. Once I went to an organization where I was the chief HR officer, they had a 20-page performance evaluation system. I said, no wonder nobody likes doing any of this. So we cut it back to just a few pages, but we insisted that people meet regularly with their staff. So this is not a once a year check the box activity. You have to provide frequent opportunities for monitoring and dialogue. If this stuff is a surprise in your once a year meeting, then you really haven't done your job. You haven't been responsible as the manager to let people know how they're doing and provide that regular opportunity for feedback. Next slide. Naomi, I think you're going to take this.
Sorry, I was on mute. First of all, I just want to say there's so many really wonderful questions that are coming in, and I'm trying to reply to people as they're coming in, but we'll try to have some for the Q&A, but if we don't get to everything during the Q&A, I'm thinking, Glenn, maybe you and I and Edie can write up some answers and then get them sent out to everybody via MCTAC. So okay. Just want to let everyone know if we don't get to everything. I just want to say a couple of words about content-specific performance. So we've been talking about performance management from a very generic perspective. which is great. And a lot of our performance appraisals come in with, kind of how are you doing on communication? How are you doing on leadership? How are you doing on teamwork? How are you doing on arriving on time or XYZ? But they're generally generic pieces. We've been developing a content-specific performance measures tool that looks specifically at how our staff, who are direct care employees, dealing with or how are they exhibiting their skills at being person-centered, recovery-oriented, trauma-informed, and whole health-focused. So I just want to give a very quick introduction to this, and we'll talk a lot more about this in webinar number 7. But just to give you a sense or flavor for this, when we're looking at how person-centered a staff person is, we want to know very specifically, are they engaging in shared decision-making? Are they avoiding labels when they're talking about the people they're serving? Are they adjusting services to reflect people's individual priorities, needs, and interests? How strengths-based are they, or are you really focusing mostly on their problems and symptoms? Are the goals and objectives in the treatment plans person-determined, or are they program-determined? Some of these things are determined by how the program functions, but if you are trying to be person-centered in your practice, then you should be seeing people exhibiting these skills. What the tool itself that is going to be that's being posted as part of a supplemental resource to this webinar has is a series of about 20 measures that are specific to these 4 domains: person-centered, recovery-oriented, trauma-informed, and whole health. And these are expectations for how people should be performing. And we want to know, do you do this rarely or never, sometimes or frequently? And we're asking managers to consider behavior that they have, quote, observed. Observed could be, I read the documentation. Observed could be what I've seen in staff meeting or during supervision sessions. Observed could be what I've heard or witnessed when I'm walking around the program or when I've come as a kind of supervision monitoring session. It could be about how people are talking about clients when they're texting other members of the team. Any opportunity to see how people are doing that you should have a sense of as a supervisor. Recognizing that each of these skills may not be relevant for all staff, there is a category that says this is not part of their job. There's also a category that says, I haven't yet had an opportunity to observe whether or not they're doing this. And so that's kind of built into the tool. But the idea is this is specific to how we do things. Now, it may be that your organization is not focused on trauma. That's fine. Maybe instead you're focused on cultural responsivity. Then you would have measures, you would develop measures that are how you should expect somebody who's been culturally responsive to be behaving. The point is, it's not okay to only measure the generic skills. We also want to make sure that we are being true to the values that we are espousing on the organizational level about what kind of organization we are. And so that's really what I want to say about content-specific performance. And so I'm going to step back and let Glenn take the reins again. So,
all right.
Go.
Well, thank you, Naomi. And I think you raise a great point. Is whatever tool you use, it has to be pretty specific for what it is that you're trying to measure and what it is that you're trying to do, and really focus on those behaviors that matter. But look, I'm going to bring it on home now by saying, just in summary, we talked about a lot of different things today, but ultimately managing performance is about working with employees to set expectations, making sure that they have the autonomy and authority to do stuff that is within their purview, being clear about it, making sure you have regular opportunities for feedback, providing opportunities for employee development, getting rid of barriers, ensuring that those expectations are met, because you got to get results. You're there to support the employee. At the same time, you're also going to hold them accountable. You're going to monitor that progress and make sure you're out there celebrating good stuff that happens, because that's the way you're going to get really great employees to repeat that really great behavior. And with that, that's the end of today's presentation. If you want to read off some of the questions, I'll answer them, or any of the 3 of us can answer them as best we can.
Sorry, it's me on mute again. I'm trying to write down as quickly as possible these questions. Let me just put out 2 or 3. Maybe you can weave some different conversations into this whole thing. There has been a set of questions about people who are overwhelmed. So we talked to people about their performance, and they are saying the reality, and this is kind of melding into the next question, which is the current environment. How do we manage performance given the fact that people are working remotely? So if you've got a 3-year-old who's climbing up onto your lap while you're trying to make client calls, how are you dealing with that? The fact is you can't really do anything during the day because you're now the homeschool teacher. That kind of overwhelming. Maybe you have a second job, right? So there's remote environment, there's people who are overwhelmed, and another question that's come up a couple of times is about what do you do when you talk to your employee, they get defensive about everything you bring up? How do you manage those conversations?
Okay, well, there's a lot there.
I know. There's a lot.
There's a lot you brought up. So let me try to as best I can. The whole idea of performance management is to provide dialogue, is to explore, is to find out where there are strengths and where there are challenges, and then to problem solve with the employee to see how can we get rid of these barriers and how can we do better. So, I'm not sure if I necessarily, as the manager, can help somebody whose kids are climbing all over them all day, but maybe we can explore, look, ultimately we're focused on results. Can this be done, at another time during the day when you have another adult who's around? Look, I don't care if you do it between 9 and 12. You can do it between 5 and 8, as long as that ultimately meets our goal, and that if it's client-centered, that the clients are available at that particular time. So, this is really all about problem solving, providing guidance. You as the manager are somebody who's probably been around a little bit more. You want to share experiences. You want to give examples. So, there are people that are feeling overwhelmed. There are people that are now really having a difficult time being remote. This is all about making sure, again, the basics are the same. Checking in regularly, dialoguing, having regular feedback, asking for help, creating that safe environment where people can say, hey, I'm overwhelmed. And to answer the question about defensiveness, people do get defensive. That's why you have to kind of create that more positive environment that I'm trying to help. This is difficult, and I recognize that. But, if people are being disrespectful, then, call them on it. Some of this is conflict resolution stuff. It's, so tell me what the problem is. I think that this is, this appears as if it's difficult for you. Tell me why. So it's really trying to get at the root of the problem and problem solving. That's really what performance management is all about.
So Naomi, I'd like to address a couple of things here that I see in the chat box, and also something that
Great.
Glenn just brought in. One of them is, I was going to say exactly the same thing, Glenn, like mine's here, about people being disrespectful. In one of Glenn's slides, there was a great thing about, you have to walk the walk and talk the talk. I think it's very important that you set up an atmosphere and a culture of respect. And these things really mirror the way that you do your clinical work. You cannot be disrespectful to the people you work with, and you cannot be disrespectful to each other, and you cannot be disrespectful to me, and I won't be disrespectful to you. Those are sort of ground rules. Like you group workers out there, I'm a group worker and an administrator, and we set up our ground rules in our groups. You can do this, you can't do that. Right off the bat, respect is something that's a ground rule and a value for your program, and you have to show it as well as demand it. And when someone isn't doing it, you have to respectfully point it out, as Glenn just said, and call them on it. So I think that's one thing that I wanted to say. And the second thing I wanted to say that I think is really important to a recovery-oriented organization and a trauma-informed, culturally competent, I can't go through the whole litany, so I'm just saying recovery-based, but is that everyone in the organization, from not just the clinical people, but also the financial people, the maintenance folk, the administrative people, that they all understand the product that you're selling. The product that we sell are services that help people in their journey towards recovery, abstinence, harm reduction, trauma-informed work. We're selling services that help people get a valued life. And everyone needs to understand that and be judged on it. And so you develop those content areas in specific ways for finance and administration, but they're still centered around the product we sell. We sell a positive behavioral health service. And so I'm not giving you specific things to put in those content areas, but I think that we are way better off when everyone understands the job of everyone else. So I hope that kind of addressed that question.
Great. Another question that somebody asked that I think I'm hoping, oh, time's almost up. Let's just ask Glenn, if you a couple of seconds, because I think it's an important question. Is there a recommended time frame for when you decide to cut someone loose?
I would say it's not written in stone, and frankly, my personal opinion was that I didn't like to give somebody a boxed time frame, because my concern was, let's say I said, hey, within 30 days you have to improve, and let's say they improved by 30%, but you were looking to them improve by 75%. 30 days later, they're going to say, hey, I improved. Why are you trying to still push me out? So I think your time frame has to be flexible. I think the key to that time frame is, number one, make sure it's not so far out where people aren't being held accountable. Number two, this is where that monitoring and regular feedback comes in. You've got to meet with a person regularly, and at those touch points, you'll see whether or not they're moving forward. I guess in my mind, it's almost like a quarterback going back, and then they have a clock in their head as to when they have to release the ball. You'll develop a time when you're discussing the feedback, and if there's a clock in your head and you're seeing that there's progress, you might want to extend it out. But I guess in my mind, the clock in my head is anywhere from 2 weeks to 45 days, depending upon what I'm seeing. But if I'm not seeing progress, good progress in 30 days, I'm going to have to call the question.
Also, I just want to add to that, Naomi. Again, it's very analogous to our clinical work, because if someone is not reaching a goal and 2 years have gone by, is that a goal for them to actually reach? And are the interventions we're suggesting to help them reach that goal, are they realistic? And so if you're working with staff on a performance review, and they're never reaching the goal that you're asking them to reach or that you've decided to reach, is the help you're giving them the appropriate help to reach that goal, or is that just something that they're not going to be able to reach? And should there be a different goal? So I think it is very individualized if we're going to be person-centered about our performance management. However, as Glenn said, I'm in 100% agreement. It can't go on forever. Right. Because you still have something that you have to accomplish. And there's an end here. So some of it is process, but you got to have an outcome.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I don't know if people want to keep staying on. I got a few more questions that are put on here. Edie, I know you have another webinar.
I do have a 12 o'clock, and so I'd be happy to stay on another minute or two, and then I'm going to have to say goodbye. And I'd be happy to answer any questions later on in emails.
All right. So I'm going to just pose one more question. The last question is, how do you provide constructive feedback or solution-oriented feedback without commenting on someone's past poor performance?
Well, I think I think it's necessary to bring up the past, but I think the key is it's not past oriented. All right, so it's not you did bad, and we need to I need to almost like chastise you for it. It's all right. Here's what I've seen you done. This isn't the way it's supposed to be done, or this isn't what we should be doing. Let's figure out a way to move forward. So I'm not suggesting you don't bring up the past, just don't focus it on the past. You're looking at, what you've done, but now we're focusing on what you can do in the future to move forward. Edie,
And that is really a great answer. And I just want to address one other that I see here in the chat box, because I think it's really important for our particular work. And that is that thin line between supervision and being a therapist. Regarding defensiveness, if the employee is aware and is sensitive to this issue, how do we get to the root without becoming the therapist? I think we need, as therapists, to remember that there is a line we don't cross. And the way we do that is because we're concentrating on the behavior that affects the job, not the behavior that affects the root of the issue. And it has been many times when I have said to someone, if this is an issue for you, you may want to work on it in therapy because it's getting in the way of your job performance. And actually, Glenn had this on a number of his slides. And it really is not about the person. It's about the behavior. And I'll add the behavior in that particular job performance. And that's that line that we all really have to be careful about crossing. Because it's so natural for us to run into therapeutic behavior. But that's not where we need to be.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I want to thank everyone for listening. And I just want to mention before you all jump off, because I know there's people are eagerly going to their next things. There is a survey that was just posted on the chat function that we'll be sending out also. That it would be very helpful if we get some feedback on today's webinar. I want to make sure that everyone knows that we have our last 2 webinars coming up. Next time in 2 weeks, we'll focus on employee engagement. And then the final one, which will be October 15th, 2 weeks after that, it's listed here as a pre-employment screening tool package, but how do we go from screening to hiring to performance management through the entire process? And it's a toolkit that we're going to be producing that has some research behind it. We want to share with you and how some users are using it. And I just want to mention that I think NICTAC also posted online a link to all of our resources that are available as well. And we hope to see you in 2 weeks, or to hear from you in 2 weeks. And if you do come back in 2 weeks, keep these conversations coming. These are fantastic. We really appreciate all the thinking that's going on behind the scenes. So thank you for participating, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Great. Thank you.